Welcome back. It's time to talk about Jim. Continuing our series of discussing the worst investigators in the game, it's Jim's time. Jim is a mystic, so the only stat that really matters is this 4 and head. That's, pretty terrible. Were it not for Amina, this would be tied for the worst. But because Amina's here, there's a 3, so he's not the lowest head available. I will say, being 4 head is perfectly workable, but you'd obviously prefer to be 5 head. Don't mention Diana, she's technically a gimmick investigator. Her 1 head is very easily a 5 and very often a 6. But Jim has very, very mediocre stats. In fact, they're just about the worst you can get, because this 3 in fist and this 3 in book may as well not exist. These could be zeros and the character would play the same in most circumstances. He's essentially a 4 head, 2-foot character, and a mystic can't do much worse than that in terms of a stat line. Then, coming down to his ability, I've heard this gets better on hard and expert, which is definitely true. But on standard, his ability to treat the modifier on skull tokens as a 0 very frequently may as well not be an ability. Additionally, anytime you reveal a star token, you may choose instead to treat it as a skull token, which is not a star. His star is a +1, which is a blank, and treating a star as a skull in most circumstances just makes your assets hurt you. It does help with his trumpet specifically, because his trumpet wants you to pull skulls, but I don't care. The trivial amount of horror healing you're gonna get out of his trumpet doesn't, like, if you draw the trumpet, then he has an ability where you heal for 1 horror, who gives a shit? What are we talking about? This is a blank ability. There's no amount of work you can put into Jim where this ability does something. And this is something important to realize with some of the worst investigators in the game, is that if you treat their ability that is like distantly perceivable, like a mirage on the horizon, it is possible that it could be good. Just maybe that mirage is real. Just maybe there's a deck where fishing out skulls does something. And the harder you chase that dream, the more time you're going to waste, because the mirage isn't real. Even if you can make skulls function, if you can do something, cobble together the assets and all of the cards across all the expansions, and now skulls are genuinely positive, you've probably spent a lot of experience and a lot of time instead of just playing mystic assets and regressing the game. Like, you can't chase a pipe dream like this. This has no value inherent to itself, and it has no obvious combo where it generates tons of value with very little work. This is a nombo. This is nothing. There's no way to make this a good ability. It's blank. It's not negative. It's no Lola, but it's blank. Combine that with a pretty bad stat line, we're gonna need a good card pool to save us. And don't get me wrong, I like me some Dunwich Splash, but that's not gonna save this. I will say that in specifically 4-head Mystics, Dunwich Splash is fantastic. It gives you deep knowledge in a color that otherwise has terrible draw. Sparrow Mask, the best way of boosting head in the entire game, in my opinion. Especially considering that your assets will be accidentally recharging at some amount of the time. And I'm never really sure what this last card should be in Jim. I feel very confident in Deep Knowledge and Sparrow Mask, but Faustian Bargain to help your economy or support your team can't possibly be bad. The card pool's at a point where with like fully upgraded Mystic assets, you adjust them however you need to be a good flex or your main Clover. Although Jim's weak enough that I don't really want him being main Clover. He's got enough flex in his deck slots that unlike Amina, he's not locked into it. He can play flex or Clover pretty easily. There's no reason to play him as a fighter because again, Mystics just have problems as fighters. I should make a whole video on this, but for now, I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna trust that you take me at face value, that Mystics are inherently not great fighters, just like survivors, and they need their card pool to help them, which obviously Jim's isn't going to. Oh, there's a huge argument that this should be like Safeguard level 1. That would be sick. That should be Safeguard level 1, yeah. Well, level 0. And with the card pool in its current state, you have cards like Spectral Razor for great flex fighting, and 4 of Cups to help get more boosts. Like, honestly, it's not like a super modern card pool, but this is enough to make a workable Gym. 49 experience in a Mystic with 2 different assets cheating things cheaper? That's dirt cheap. There should be an in the thick of it in the deck, like you want to start with 2 copies of 4 of Cups. I'm gonna be real with you, you're a 4-head Mystic with nothing in his deck, so you may as well. But yeah, I think Jim can like super easily be built into a functional character. He's got more draw than a mono Mystic. He's got Sparrow Mask to help make up for both his bad foot and his bad head. And especially after the first scenarios, and I know the first scenarios are the most important, and that hurts Jim a lot, but it's also worth noting that Mystics will get their cards upgraded even with minimal victory, and he will, like by scenario 3 or 4, have like really good head anytime he's testing it on one of these assets. which is why I didn't really like focus too hard on things like Read the Signs or Spectral Razor. Spectral Razor is uniquely valuable and very strong. I would like to have 2 copies of it if I'm flex fighting, but because it's not going to give me a very high total number, I don't care about it that much. It's why it's an easy cut for me. So Jim can be built in a way where, you know, Mystic assets are strong. The card pool can get him some more draw, get him some more head, get him where he needs to be, and make him do some pretty good stuff. I think 100% you cut a Faustian bargain for a Safeguard, but the issue is with Safeguard added to your asset cost, can you like get a second one? Do you need more economy? If Mystic economy were just a little bit better and you could run like double Safeguard, 1 deep knowledge, that would be incredibly good, but he would need a little bit stronger card pool. Maybe someday, Jim, maybe someday. And that's always how it is with Jim. He always feels like the Dunwich Slash is close to doing something really strong, but you have to look at a scenario 0 when these aren't upgraded, and every single thing you do, you're like living on a prayer, hoping you beat the bag, where you're up 2, maybe up 3, losing to -4, losing to curses. Curses you put in the bag, by the way. Or your deck is weaker, pick one. It's not super strong. I'm not gonna show the level 0 version because this is a Mystic. It's not because I think you shouldn't play Jim, as I've said on some other terrible characters. Although like there's not really a good reason to play Jim. I don't think he's torturous in the way some other F tier characters are. I just think that Jim has very little merit compared to other characters and doesn't deserve to be high on a tier list in any capacity. And now it's time for this prize. This is actually a 2-part video. You might have got it from the thumbnail actually. This is for Jim and Parallel Jim. See, I rank my tier list based on the best version of a character. I'm not going to rank Parallel separate from Vanilla because Parallel's really deck building options and alternate abilities, and you can pick both at once to be full Parallel. But ranking Parallel separate from the base Investigator implies that half Parallel, either way, doesn't exist. You'd have to rank 4 different characters. I just view it as a ton of options for the original character. So it's worth noting that like Parallel Jim does exist. And man, it took the wind out of my sails to realize I have to talk about Parallel Jim. Unfortunately, we have no card art on the wiki for Jim, but I'll go ahead and talk about him. Now his abilities, after you reveal a skull or curse, you can get a charge back on a Mystic asset. Well, any asset, but you only have Mystic assets. And that is actually an ability relating to skulls that fucking does something. And his ability to treat the star as a skull or a curse instead actually does something now, because his ability does something. Isn't that crazy? How when your ability does a thing, it doesn't do nothing. Wild, I know. And then for his deck building options, it's Mystic 0 to 3, spells and curse cards 0 to 4, neutral 0 to 5, and then up to 5 survivor level 0. But we're not done, because we've actually stapled an entire second character type onto this with the Spirit deck. See, you're also required to have a Spirit deck, which is going to be governed by a card called the Beyond. We're going to get into it in a second. And that Spirit deck is going to be 9 different allies from any class, level 0 to 2, and a Vengeful Shade. The Spirit deck essentially is a deck of 10 cards, including your new signature weakness, where you shuffle it, you set it aside, and every turn, you attach the top card to the Beyond. Those cards have no soak, but they trigger all of their text as normal. And then, once you have 4 of them, you're going to flip the Beyond and resolve this thing on the back, which more or less says a bunch of random shit's going to happen, but usually everyone attached is going to get discarded, and you're going to take some random assortment of damage and horror. So coming with this deck, there are 2 types of cards you really want in your Beyond deck. One is cards like Priest of Two-Face and Stray Cat and Mysterious Raven, where they can be discarded immediately, because if you discard them off of the Beyond deck, it won't trigger the Beyond deck's forced effect. The other type of card you want are Gabriel Carrillos, where you're getting draw every turn, or Leo DeLucas, where you're getting extra actions. Those are going to give you recursive, powerful effects that are enough to warrant taking the damage. And lastly, you have effects like Medical Student or Lab Assistant, where they come in and they do something powerful, and it's worth probably taking the damage. In the future, it's possible for the Beyond deck to become really broken if there's a critical mass of allies that self-discard, allowing you to essentially just run your signature weakness, Leo DeLuca, like one other ally that's just recursively good, and then 7 guys that all discard immediately guaranteed, whereas you have cards right now like Stray Cat that you can only discard if there's an enemy. If you were able to always get rid of the allies immediately and never let the Beyond flip, it would be much more powerful, but that density of cards isn't there yet, because it has to be 9 different allies. Additionally, you have the Vengeful Shade in your Beyond deck, which is a 5/2/5 enemy that deals horror to. And just like Patrice's weakness, you can fight or evade it while it's attached to the Beyond, as though it were in Patrice's hand, similarly to that, I mean. If you succeed, you'll discard it, which puts it back on the bottom of the Beyond deck, and if you fail, it'll spawn engaged with you. It doesn't hit you or anything. So it's possible to just like rip it out by failing a dodge check and tell your fighter to deal with it, but at 5 fists, 2 health, that actually is like not super easy. They can't just beat cop it, they have to beat a pretty substantial fight check. And you will have to deal with it pretty much immediately, because otherwise every time something attaches to the Beyond, it's going to attack you immediately for 2 horror, which is completely untenable to be taking that round after round. So, in short, there's a lot going on with Parallel Gem. You've got the Olive McBride curse fishing archetype, where you're trying to keep this clairvoyance and rite of seeking going forever. You've got 4 head and 2 foot still, so you're using like Holy Rosaries and Sparrow Mass, trying to defend that off. You've got access to all the curse cards, so now you get Deep Knowledge and Fallacy and Bargain, and screw it, throw in Lucky, that's actually a great card. I will say about Lucky, I think Lucky is actually simultaneously over and underrated. There are a lot of new players that really overvalue Lucky, and there are a lot of veteran players that really undervalue Lucky. Because what Lucky does is it allows you to say, I'm up 1 or I'm up 2 on a relatively important test. I don't have to commit cards. And then a substantial percentage of the time, you just pass and you keep Lucky. Lucky allows you to stretch your resources a lot further. It's not just good because it allows you to pass a failed test, it allows you to risk failure, and every time you don't fail, that's a success you got because Lucky was in your hand, but that cost you no resources. Faye's obviously very good in a character that's going to be running Favor of the Moon and filling the bag with curses, because then you use Favor of the Moon with Faye on your check, and you're actually up 1 with Faye guaranteed to come back to your hand. There's a lot going on with Parallel Gem. There's a lot of throughput and a lot of damage coming out of the Beyond deck. There's a lot of value coming out of his curse engine. It's incredibly hard for me to evaluate at a glance. My opinion looking at Parallel Gem is that he's best off as a Kluber, and the reason for that is, as always, Mystics are bad fighters. They're functional, but they've got no strengths. You don't want to make them fight because they're better at other roles. You could build him flex, but it takes the least deck slots to build him as a pure Kluber, and he's most efficient as a pure Kluber. The least assets required to be in play, the least different things you need to work on simultaneously. I see that I would want to play him as a Kluber, and I wouldn't mind trying to find a way to like reliably deal with the Vengeful Shade. But since you're like, if you ran Spectral Razor, for instance, it would only be 7 to 5. You'd have to still commit. And I just don't see a way to make Vengeful Shade easy to deal with unless I'm flex fighting later in a campaign. It genuinely seems to me like if I ever want to play Parallel Gem, the best way to deal with Vengeful Shade is to just play pure Kluber, last action, fail and evade, and have a fighter that's just capable of dealing with it. And that sucks to have a signature weakness that is scary and puts pressure on someone else, especially because even though Parallel Gem is cool, I don't think he's super strong. But I don't really see a clean way for Parallel Gem to deal with this shit. I first saw Parallel Gem, I was super hype about him, I thought he'd be really strong, but at the end of the day, like, other characters don't run out of charges, they beat the scenario, so getting more charges isn't actually super valuable. This is something I see all the time with Uncaged the Soul 3 at my table. It seems great in theory, but the reality is you still just play it to get your spell out the first time, and you typically don't run out of charges in a given scenario. You have like just enough to succeed even with a couple of auto fails thrown in. So Uncaged the Soul 3 doesn't really give you charges you need, and in the same way, Gem's ability feels like hype to me. It feels like obviously gain a charge is value, but I'm not convinced it's real value that actually matters. And then with the stuff going down here in the Beyond deck, I honestly just look at it and I feel like the flip effects on the Beyonds, all of this shit, where it's like when you get the auto fail, take a direct damage or horror, skulls, heal a horror, anything else, take a direct damage. Like, this scares the shit out of me. There are so many things, curses amongst them, that deal a direct damage to me, and my stupid trumpet's only gonna be pulling healing if I can get the normal horror healing trumpet without worrying about anything. I've got to bust out the alternate character cards to talk about the stupid trumpet. Like, the original trumpet is only healing horror. The upgraded trumpet is still only healing horror. It heals it from everyone, but it's not healing damage. And you need to be able to deal with a lot of damage if you're gonna take a bunch of random direct damage because you can't control the Beyond deck. And at the end of the day, I just feel like this is really sketchy. The value he gets isn't intrinsically and obviously going to make the game much easier. The Beyond deck does seem genuinely strong, but it also seems like if it shuffles a couple of times, it's going to kill you. The Beyond deck is something that I think is actually really cool. I really like the mechanic of the Beyond deck, but I think the card pool's at a point where this is a net negative to the character, and I would rank Jim higher, probably get him out of F tier even, if this weren't attached to his parallel. This being so much sketchy damage that's coming in at you makes me think he's a worse character, not a better character. And when I first evaluated him, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that he was taking shitloads of direct damage from the Beyond flipping. And now that I do realize that, I just can't stomach the idea of playing him, especially because, like, as you can see looking at this, it's not like I'm running a ton of Health Soak. It's hard to put good Health Soak in this Jim. At the end of the day, I honestly think original Jim is better. I think parallel Jim fills the bag with curses, which your teammates will usually dislike, and I find that cursed teams just like step on each other's toes, right? Like, we just stop being able to play Deep Knowledge and all get mad at each other. And then the one Guardian fighter with a flamethrower that's not playing curses draws 6 of them and wasted ammo and hates everyone. I never feel like cursed characters synergize with each other. They synergize with paradox characters that rip the curses out of the bag for huge effects. So like, the curse stuff in parallel Gem's only really good in very specific team comps, it feels like. Otherwise, it's a detriment. The Beyond deck feels like a net loss that makes staying alive very difficult. And the more I play the game, the more Soak is the only thing I care about in terms of the Mythos deck. There are 2 types of Mythos cards. Ones that impede forward progress, like Frozen in Fear, and then there are cards that actually just kill you, like Rotting Remains. And every other type of card I don't give a shit about. It can say anything. Only discover 1 clue at a location. You can't test foot this round. There's so many wild effects you can print on a Mythos card, and if I'm still allowed to move forward and not dead, I don't give a shit. Those are the 2 types of Mythos cards I care about. And having the Beyond deck deal tons of damage to me is like the worst case scenario during the Mythos phase. I don't want my own deck doing that. That's terrifying. So at the end of the day, I think that it's probably not meaningfully better than the original Flex Gem. Which brings us back to the bottom of the tier list, where I have him sitting under Amina Zidane, because Amina's got similarly good draw with her uniquely enabled Scroll of Prophecies because of her good economy. She's able to counteract her 3-head just as well as Jim is able to counteract his 4-head, arguably even better because she has access to the most reliable cat mask in the game. I would take an Amina Clover over an anything Jim, parallel or vanilla, every day of the week. Jim just does it like Amina has an ability. Jim doesn't. Parallel Jim does. He also has the Beyond deck. Don't really want that second one, to be honest. And there might be a day in the distant future where parallel Jim skyrockets up the list, because the Beyond deck hits a point where there are 7 cards that discard immediately guaranteed, and then the other 2 are Summon Hound, Leo DeLuca, and your signature weakness, and you're off to the races, right? But right now, that's not the parallel Gem we're dealing with. The parallel Gem we're dealing with right now feels volatile and unsafe, and he extends that to your entire team with a curse archetype that's not even giving throughput, just endurance, and it feels like parallel Gem doesn't have the ability to play an endurance game in the first place because of the Beyond deck. So I have to leave him in my F tier. I don't think Jim is terrible. I think this Jim deck is perfectly capable of getting through a campaign, surviving, and getting pretty much full victory as long as his teammates are better than him, which is actually a pretty low bar to set. It's just that I see very little reason, in fact, no reason, to play this Jim over a different Mystic. There is nothing Jim offers that someone else doesn't do better, and there is nothing interesting about Jim. He has a bad stat line, no ability, and a very limited card pool. So in F tier he remains, and if you have a way of convincing me otherwise, especially with parallel Jim, I'd love to hear it, but I think the only thing that's going to move Jim is time. Eventually, the parallel Jim's going to break out, but not today, not tomorrow, not even with the next expansion, but maybe by the end of this card game's life, parallel Jim will finally go to the moon. For now though, I'm going to bed. Good night. I've been Rather Incoherent. Thank you for watching. Do the YouTube algorithm dance, you know what it means. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, I tremendously appreciate it, and I'll see all of you in the next one.